Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today we're looking at the 1975 story, X-Men Second Genesis. The year was 1963, and Marvel Comics was in the middle of really making a name for itself. A couple years earlier, they had released Fantastic Four, kicking off a massive new level of legendary superheroes that would include the Incredible Hulk, the Mighty Thor, the Amazing Spider-Man, and the Invincible Iron Man, among others. Hoping to continue making waves, Marvel would introduce two teams of heroes in July of 1963, the Avengers and the X-Men. Despite the series being created by Stan the Man Lee and the King himself, Jack Kirby, and moving on to other great creators such as Roy Thomas and Neil Adams, the original team of X-Men never really caught on. In fact, following issue 66, the title just became a series of reprints, reselling the stories already printed earlier in the title's own run. And that could have been the end of it. But in somewhat of an effort to save it, Marvel editor Lin Wayne and artist David Cockrum would create a new group of diverse international X-Men to replace the existing team. Imagine thinking diversity would be a strength and not a weakness. What a crazy idea! And it worked. The new team would be a huge success. So much so that rather than continue a series of giant-sized X-Men comics, which you'll notice the cover does say, this is the senses-shattering first issue, they just brought the new team over to the main X-Men title and continued the story from there. This was also one of my first introductions to comic books, thanks to a little CD-ROM I had as a kid that contained the entire issue in an interactive format, with sound effects and voiceover narration and links to other comics referenced by this issue, or 2-second clips from the 1992 animated series that were similar to something in the story. At the end of the issue, you could even take a quiz about what you learned of the X-Men during the course of the experience, and if you got enough answers right, you were treated to a much longer clip from the animated series. Anyway, now I'm an obsessed comic book nerd. That's probably unrelated, I'm sure. And here we are now, on the 50th anniversary of this comic, if you can believe it. 50 years since the X-Men lit up the world and forever changed the course of history in comic books. So let's see just how they did that, and take this away. The comic opens on a small, peaceful German village that's currently not so peaceful, because the populace is hunting down soon-to-be your new favorite character, Kurt Wagner. Or Wagner, I guess. Kurt's crime against these people is merely existing, since that existence comes with blue fur, yellow eyes, vampire fangs, pointy ears, unusual hands and feet, and a demon tail. They chase him until he strikes back in a rage, but he's quickly overwhelmed by the size of the mob. Fortunately, a commanding voice yells, "Stop!" And they do. And this voice comes from Charles Xavier, leader of the X-Men, as any longtime fan would already know. Xavier says he's there for Kurt, offering to teach him all about his powers in being a mutant, and Kurt agrees to go with him. So it's off on a montage to recruit others with similar skills and in similar ways. First up is Canada, where Xavier meets with a representative of a secret government agency. Hey kids, look! It's Wolverine! Yay! Unlike new character Kurt Wagner, this is Wolvie's second appearance, having been created, or really premiered, by Lin Wayne himself for the Incredible Hulk 1 year earlier. Not wanting to let a good idea go to waste, Wayne brought Wolvie back here to accept Xavier's offer, resign his commission with the Canadian government in his typical brusque manner, and leave with Xavier to go join the X-Men. Next, in Tennessee, Xavier meets with Sean Cassidy, the Banshee. Banshee had first appeared in an early issue of X-Men as a villain, though he was being mind-controlled at the time, and once freed would be an occasional ally of the team. Xavier meets Banshee at the Grand Ole Opry, which young Ramsey thought was meant to indicate that Banshee was pretty highfalutin, just casually going to an opera. I didn't know at the time that it was actually probably just like a country music show, since that's what the Grand Ole Opry is, not an opera house, just a country music venue. Yeah, I'm beginning to realize young Ramsey wasn't very bright. Once Banshee agrees to help, we move on to Kenya, where local farmers are praying to Aurora, goddess of the storm, for rain to make their crops grow, and the goddess obliges. Xavier is impressed with Aurora's control of the weather, but insists that she's no goddess, and instead, a mutant. He's then like, I can show you the world, do you trust me? And she's like, sure. So next Xavier recruits Sunfire in Japan. Shiro Yoshida had appeared in one of the final issues of the original X-Men run, and made a couple other appearances since, like in the Avengers Defenders War that I covered last year. Next up, we head to Siberia, in what was still at the time the USSR. On a small farming commune, Peter Rasputin will save his little sister from a runaway tractor by turning his skin into indestructible metal, breaking the tractor instead of either of them. And thus, we also meet Ilyana, though she's not named here, who much later will of course become the new mutant Magic, but no one suspects her future importance yet, not even the writers. Peter is hesitant to leave behind his little farming community, but agrees with Xavier's argument that great power such as his should be shared with the world, so he says his Das Vidanias and joins the X-Men. Lastly, we head for Arizona, where we meet John Proudstar, an Apache warrior. Like Yoshida, John is resentful of the white man for the things he's done to his people, but his pride won't let him back down from Xavier's challenge to prove his worth as an X-Man. So our heroes are now all gathered together, and our new characters are provided with costumes made with unstable molecules, just like the suits of the Fantastic Four. And with that, we're finally ready to learn just what the heck is going on. And that starts with Cerebro, the machine capable of detecting mutants. It discovered an extraordinarily powerful new mutant on the Pacific island of Krakoa, and alerted the X-Men group as we had last seen them. This was Cyclops, Angel, Marvel Girl, Iceman, Lorna Dane, and Havoc. Beast alone was missing due to having left to join the Avengers by this point. The remaining of the classic X-Men team heads to the island, but have only just arrived when they're all knocked out by an unseen opponent. Cyclops alone wakes up to find himself without powers and on the plane headed back home, the autopilot locked in, preventing him from turning back to Krakoa. When he gets back home, he explains the disappearance of the rest of the X-Men to Xavier, and though his powers do come back, stronger than ever even, he's not sure what to do. But Xavier is, and that brings us back around to the start of the story, and Xavier gathering the new X-Team together. So the new team gets their start in a trial by fire, joining Cyclops without even receiving any training to head straight away to Krakoa in an effort to save the original X-Men. En route, Cyclops also gives all the new characters code names. So Proudstar becomes Thunderbird, Peter becomes Colossus, Aurora becomes Storm, and Kurt becomes... The team splits up, approaching the island from north, south, east, and west in groups of 2. Team West is Cyclops and Thunderbird, and moments after they land, their plane mysteriously vanishes. A temple suddenly appears in the distance, so all 4 teams head towards it, fighting as they go. With some teams having to fight the island itself, like with vines or a rock slide, while others, like Wolverine and Banshee, fight giant crab people, and Nightcrawler gets attacked by a Zapdos. But they all manage to overcome their opposition and reach the temple, and once they're all there, they breach the temple walls to find the original X-Men all wrapped up in vines that seem to be feeding on them. They cut free the OG team, only to have Angel yell at them that they shouldn't have come at all, because this was a trap. The mutant they came for, the original mutant, is the island itself. Krakoa, the island that walks like a man. That's so freaking corny. I love it. We learn here that Krakoa was the site of atomic bomb testing, and like the Bikini Atoll, that testing had disastrous effects. Just in this case, the radiation mutated every living organism on the island, linking them together into one hive mind and creating a hunger in them that could only be sated by feeding on the mutants that had come to their island. But those mutants, the original X-Men group, weren't enough to fill that hunger, so Cyclops was sent off to gather more mutants for Krakoa to feed on, and without realizing it, he did exactly what the island wanted. The walking representation of the island then attacks the two X teams, but they aren't going down without a fight, and a battle erupts. Even Xavier, from back at the safety of the X Mansion, joins in on the battle, pitting his telepathic mind powers against the collective intelligence of the island. The real power, though, comes from just two of the X-Men. First is Storm, who calls up a hurricane so that she can use its lightning to supercharge Lorna Dane's magnetism, creating such a powerful electromagnetic pull that it reaches down to the very core of the Earth and rips the island free of the planet, catapulting it into outer space. Iceman creates an ice raft in the ocean for the X-Men to dive onto to get off the island before it's launched away. The hole left behind from the missing island creates a massive whirlpool, but the X-Men manage to ride it out from the safety of their ice raft. And when the sea is calm once again, their missing plane emerges from the depths, having been left behind by the island. So they board to return home, and the comic ends with them wondering what they're going to do about a team of 13 X-Men. That's just too many X-Men. And clearly, no one at the time had yet conceived of the concept of having more than one X-Men team. That would be crazy. Yeah. The answer to Angel's question will be answered in issues 94 and 95 of the X-Men series, which are extended versions of what had been planned as the next issue of Giant Size X-Men. With the job of saving the original X-Men team finished, Sunfire will consider his work complete and will simply leave immediately upon arriving back in New York, having no desire to be part of any team that would have him for a member. The original X-Men members would also leave, feeling as though they have graduated and now, as adults, are ready to move on with their lives and be their own people. Cyclops, however, decides to stay, feeling he won't be able to fit in among regular people since he can't shut off his mutant power. Since his relationship with Jean Grey doesn't end, though, she'll be right back with the team within a few issues once Chris Claremont takes over. Everyone else stays, and so Cyclops, as the experienced member, takes over the ordeal of training them all in the Danger Room, forging them into a team and helping them master their own mutant abilities. It won't be long before this new team is tested, either, as Count Nefaria, a villain that faced the original X-Men, takes over NORAD with his army of Ani-Men, men mutated into animal things. He then threatens to use the mountain base's control over the US missile systems to launch global nuclear annihilation unless a ransom is paid. The Avengers are apparently busy with something else, but Hank McCoy, the Beast, calls up his old teammates in the X-Men and makes them aware of the situation. So they fly on down to Colorado, and the X-Men quickly prove more than a match for the Ani-Men. Nefaria, defeated, attempts to escape in a jet, but Thunderbird, in a rage, leaps onto the jet and begins smashing it with his fist alone. The plane then crashes, and though Nefaria will somehow survive to continue plaguing various heroes in the future, Thunderbird will be pronounced dead from the crash. And with his death, we'll more or less have what will be the X-Men team for some time after this, with only slight alterations like when Banshee leaves or when Rogue eventually joins. But those are stories for other times, and other videos, and for now, it's time to get to the breakdown. It's almost impossible to overstate the importance of this story on comic book history in general, and X-Men history especially. Even seemingly innocuous things from this story have been brought to the forefront. I already mentioned Colossus's sister, who in this story is a nameless throwaway plot device, but ends up becoming an extremely prominent X-Man character for the rest of time. Or there's Thunderbird, who has sadly little to offer in this story, being brought in just to be belligerent and then die. Yet his brother, James Proudstar, will become the second Thunderbird in later Warpath and be a recurring character in New Mutants and a member of just about every version of X-Force. And there's of course Krakoa, which will return 40 years after its supposed death here and become an X-Man itself, essentially. Or at least home to them, and to every other mutant in the world. Even once the Krakoan age finally ends, the next period, called From the Ashes, is probably named for the very first words of narration from this comic. And it's easy to understand why this comic would have such an effect. It was a brilliant move to start in the middle of the story, with recruiting the new team of X-Men rather than focusing on the old. The pacing for the introduction of each character is perfect, and I love how they focus more on who the character is and the personal conflicts they'll be bringing to the story, rather than what their mutant powers are, as those we'll be able to explore as time goes on. It's almost 3/4 of the way through the issue before we even see Nightcrawler's famous teleport. Before that, you just thought he was a weird looking dude. And that unique storytelling, combined with the fascinatingly diverse team, all over David Cockrum's dynamic art, makes this a fun time even 50 years later. So I'm giving this series a recommendation level of very high, which will probably surprise no one. This is a comic that the past 50 years of comic books have been attempting to live up to, and should be a must-read for any comic book fan. The collected edition gets a bit complicated, but let's go ahead and give it 1 X-Men X, which is, of course, a great thing. I'm sure that over the years there have been a ton of different collections of this story, but the one I was able to track down was the Marvel Masterworks collection, which not only collects this issue, but also the next 7 issues following, and includes an introduction by Chris Claremont, as well as a ton of bonus art in the back. As always, the Masterworks collections from Marvel live up to their name. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Just a short one this week, but I felt it was really worth covering this comic, not only because of its importance, but also because of its 50th anniversary. Happy anniversary! What's 50? Is it like diamonds? I don't have diamonds to give, I'm sorry. Just take the Emma Frost comic I covered last week. Yeah, probably there won't be a comic next week because I'm going out of town for a couple days, so that's really gonna cut into my time to work on a video, but when I do get back, it'll be with some more X-Men stories, and then on to just general Marvel stuff, I think. So if you're excited about that, or you just enjoyed this video, or you just feel the call of the collective intelligence that brought you here in the first place, then make sure to click the like and subscribe and all those things so you can help the channel out. And so you can help yourself to make sure to be here next time, and I hope to see you then, right here in the Comic Cave.